Aloha, welcome to Netra's News. I'm Netra Halperin. This evening we're going to be talking about a very serious topic, which is war veterans. So we've got some great guests in the studio this evening. We've got Janna Hoehn, who is a volunteer for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Okay, and we've also got Fred, and he's going to be talking about veterans benefits. So, Janna, would you like to tell people what is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, and what are you doing here on Maui?
Okay, well, I started about almost a year ago, month of June, and I actually had gone to Washington, D.C. for the first time about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I had always wanted to see the Vietnam Memorial Wall because that was the war that was going on while I was in high school. So when I got to the wall, I wanted to get an etching, even though I didn't know anyone that had been killed over there. So I walked up to the wall and I was pretty overwhelmed. There's 58,272 names on that wall. Wow. So I looked at the names, and there are diamonds behind most of the names, mm-hmm. and there are 4 dots behind some of them. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what the difference was, so I asked a gentleman next to me, and he explained to me that the 4 dots, represent a missing in action soldier, so one that never came home. So of course, that's what I wanted. Okay. And so I found a soldier that was missing in action, and I did my etching, mm-hmm. put it in my purse, and I thought, I'm going to do some research on this soldier mm-hmm. when I get home. Mm-hmm. So once I got home, I did just that. I researched, and I thought, well, maybe his parents had never been able to go to the wall, so maybe I should send this to them. So I did search for about 6 months. I had a profile. Whenever you type a soldier's name in on the internet, it will come up as a profile on this Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund site. Mm-hmm. And it'll give you all the pertinent information about this soldier and when he was killed and such. And I researched him, I got his profile, but unfortunately I could not find any family. Mm. And not even thinking that Vietnam was over 40 years ago, right. It's very possible his parents had passed away. Right. So I was a little disappointed, but I decided that I'd like to at least see what he looked like. So with the help of my cousin in California, she was able to find a yearbook photo of Gregory Crossman. Okay. So this is how I actually got started with this, and this is a scrapbook page of a scrapbook that I made about our trip. So when I finished this, I decided that I would, I just want to know more information about him. And so one night I was sitting there, and on the news, there was a story about the call for photos for mm-hmm. the Vietnam Memorial Fund. Mm-hmm. And they said anyone that had a photograph of a Vietnam soldier that was killed there, could they submit it? The goal is to get 58,272 photos, one of every single soldier. Mm-hmm. And these photos will be housed in the education center that is going to be built. They're hoping to break ground in November this year, a Veterans Day weekend. Okay. So I realized I had this photo, and of course I sent it in right away. And about 5 days later, I got an email from the founder and president of the Vietnam Memorial Wall, Jan Scruggs, mm-hmm. and he asked me if I could help out finding the soldiers from Maui. And I had the time and decided this was just a perfect project for me. Yeah. So I started going through the phone book. I called every person in the phone book that had a name of one of these soldiers. I did find a few soldiers that way. Unfortunately, not very many of them. And then I went on to the high school yearbooks, and then the obituaries, the microfilm at the library. I found some photos through the obituaries. And then I started hitting brick walls.
Yeah.
So how am I going to find these? Well, I called the Maui News, and they were very interested in the project, and they did a beautiful front page article for me. It was very close to 4th of July. And when they listed all of these soldiers' names, a lot of the families saw their loved one's name.
Okay.
And that's when the calls started coming in, and it was quite overwhelming. And then I started hitting brick walls again.
Okay.
You know, you only get so many.
Right.
And so the Maui News was so kind. They ran 4 different articles for me. Every time they'd run an article, someone new would see it.
Right.
Many people read the Maui News online.
Yeah.
And so I was getting calls from all over the United States. And so this is really kind of how it started. And it took me about 6 months. And I wasn't so sure I was going to be able to find all of them. It was really getting difficult. There's some families don't live on Maui anymore, or Maui County. And we were down to 3. And I don't usually quit a project, so I really needed to find these last 3. And one of them, the third from the last, we found actually his son on Facebook.
There you go, Facebook.
And so I called him and asked him if he happened to be Magno Campos Sr.'s son that was killed in Vietnam. And he said, yes, I am. And I said, do you have a photo of your father? And he said, have you got a computer? Within 5 minutes, I had a photo of this man I'd been looking 6 months for.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And then the last 2 both came in on the same day the next week. We had found one over on Oahu at the, I think it was Honolulu, I can't remember. It's the community college now.
Okay.
And it was called something different back
Kapiolani?
then. You know, I'm not sure the name of it, but they found him in the yearbook, and they were so kind to email me the photo. And then the last one, through Ancestry.com, we were able to find a relative, actually a distant, a cousin. And he was so kind, he got me the photo. And October 16th, I had all 42 photos.
That's amazing.
So after I submitted them all, these are all on a website at this point. They are going to be housed in the Education Center when it's built. Every year on the soldier's birthday, his picture is going to be up on the wall. I'm not quite sure exactly the whole dynamic, but I'm assuming, you know, there'll be somehow they're going to flash these pictures. But it's pretty amazing. I've seen pictures of it and everything, and I'm very passionate about this project. It's going to teach younger generations all about the Vietnam War and the other wars as well. And it's a really project dear to my heart. I'd always hoped that I could do something for the Vietnam vets, and this has just blossomed into something a lot bigger than I thought it would. So I decided to make this wall.
It's beautiful.
And it was donated by several businesses on Maui. And I've been taking it around to libraries, churches, schools, and giving this same presentation and showing some of, you know, telling some stories about some of the soldiers. And it's been very well received. And it's time they get some recognition. So that's what this is all about.
So what would you say your goal is? What is the message that you want people to get from this?
Well, putting a face with a name completely changes the dynamics of that wall. When you're looking at all these names, it's massive. But when you're putting a picture, it just, I knew all the names of these men to start with, but I didn't know what they looked like.
Okay.
And it completely changes it. And I just hope that people will look at this and see some of these young men were very young when they were killed. I mean, our oldest soldier here was only 44.
Yeah.
Many of them had children, families. They were just young Maui boys having a great time, and To date, I have not found one soldier that was drafted. And I haven't been able to find families for all of the soldiers, but many of them, their families have told me they enlisted.
They enlisted.
Yes. And there is one soldier that I have here on my wall that he was exempt because he was the only son, and he went anyway. So he wanted to serve his country. So.
What would you like young people, or young men, or I guess just young people these days, what would you like young people, is there a message that you want to give them about war and military?
Well, these brave men gave their lives for our country, and I don't know if young people really know what that means. And, you know, it's, like I said, these faces seem to tell more of a story than a name on the wall. So I'm very much hoping that they know what these men gave. And if you remember, the Vietnam veterans weren't treated very well when they came back from Vietnam, and I'm hoping to right a wrong here.
And you know, that is so unfortunate. And I think what happened is that people were against the policy.
Absolutely.
And the policy were not made by the soldiers.
No.
The policy was made by the politicians. And I guess it's harder.
It is.
The politicians are far, far away in Washington. And so instead of appropriately venting their disagreement with policy, which is, you know, that's what American citizens are supposed to do, is express their opinions on policy, because those are our elected leaders, they unfortunately took that out on the soldiers. And that's not right.
That's correct. Yes, I've had soldiers come up to me that weren't even from Maui that have seen this display, and they have just tears rolling down their faces, because they said, if you have any idea what was done to us when we came back. And they tell me stories, and it's very heartbreaking, because being there was a draft at that time, many of these men never wanted to go. Yeah. And they went and did their service and came home to, it wasn't very nice.
A lot of anger.
Very much, very much.
And I think that's, in general, that is the dynamic that I'm talking about, where people misplace, because our country has gotten so big that people, it's not like you can just go up to the policymaker and say, you know, I don't like that decision. You know, I disagree. I mean, you can send an email, but, you know, a lot of emails gets lost in a lot of shuffle. So people start feeling powerless. And then they start feeling like they got to take out their anger at who's ever around. And And I think, you know, and I talk about this on other shows, is the feeling that we're not controlling our country. We're not controlling our country anymore, and that other forces are, and that's really sad. And it's sad that happened to these young men who, you know, they were doing what they felt to be the right thing to do, and yet it. And later, when we talk to Fred, we're going to, you know, talk about some of the ramifications of that. You know, what happens when you've gone through a lot of trauma, and then you get ridicule at home, and then it's almost like more painful. Correct. To get that ridicule and anger and resentment when you are supposed to be in your home. Correct.
I had one mother that made the comment that maybe it was better that her son was killed over there than to have to come home to the ridicule that the soldiers had to come to. And that really, that got me. Yeah. That, you know, that it was really hard for them. I'd like to point out a few things about a couple of the soldiers, may I? Yeah. Thank you. Michael Pacheco was the first Maui soldier that was killed in Vietnam from Maui. He was only 18 years old. And then the last soldier that was killed was David Weishman. And David was being transferred to, he only had 2 weeks left in Vietnam. They were taking him out of the combat zone. And if I realize the story correctly, they got into a no-fly zone, and the plane was, I believe a helicopter was brought down and he was killed. So that was pretty bittersweet. Melvin Yamashita, that particular photo was a professional photo taken by a magazine, and he was killed just a few hours after this photo was taken.
Wow.
So we have, my oldest soldier was Kanji Yoshino. He was 44. He had 2 sons. They actually live on Oahu, and his wife, I spoke to her, lovely, lovely lady. And I've had some very lovely conversations, wonderful, wonderful families, and they're very heartbreaking. To this day, you know, they miss them just as much as they did when it happened. We have a couple of funny stories. Charles Kalani here, he had a nickname of Hawaiian Daredevil. Apparently, he liked everything fast. And started out as a young boy. His best friend tells me these stories. Riding bicycles and always had to be fast. And then it went to cars. And his mother had told him that she would meet him halfway if he would save money to get a car. And he got a '57 Chevy. And they used to cruise all over Maui. And that's when we didn't have to wear seatbelts. So there was a lot of boys in this car. And apparently, Charles found one of the red lights that, like the police officers have. He connected it to the car, and apparently Maui has a lover's lane.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
The boys went up there with this flashing red light, and he said, "You've never seen cars start up and move so fast." So, you know, they were just young boys having fun, and, you know, he went in when he was 18 years old, and I think Charles was 19 when he was killed. But we've, you know, this gentleman here, Albert Sambalan, he had 8 children when he was killed, and the mother just completely fell apart. The children were put into foster homes. None of them ever to be a family again. And when you post these photos on this site, you put your email address. And I do from time to time get contacted by family members. Well, I got an email from Albert's daughter, and she was 12 years old when Albert was killed. And she wanted to know who I was and how I had a picture of her father. So, of course, I explained how I obtained his photo. And if you can see tears in an email, they were there. She'd been looking for photos of her father for over 20 years and had never found any. So when she happened to type his name in one day, these photos came up. And if that was the only thing I accomplished here was to give her photos of her father, it really meant a lot to me. And she was just so grateful. So I've just had a wonderful experience doing this, and it's not just Maui. There are soldiers all over the United States, and they're still looking for photos. We've collected over 32,000 photos.
Wow.
But that's just, you know, that's about halfway, so we still have a lot of work to do. So it's a campaign that's going on all over the United States. So.
So it seems like a lot of what you're doing is bringing healing and closure to families.
I hope so. I know that they're just completely overwhelmed at what I'm doing, that somebody would want to remember their loved ones, and it means a lot to me. I just feel that I didn't know any of these men at all, and I feel like I have 42 brothers, and they travel with me a lot. So, Walter Ricard, his family, I have contacted several of his family members, and his widow lives in Lahaina, and he has sisters that are on the mainland. And they were, the two sisters were not, they hadn't heard of this project. Well, how I found them was through an obituary from one of the sisters' husbands had passed away. So I called the funeral home in Kentucky, I believe, and asked him if he could have her call me. I explained the whole project, and he didn't get it quite right, but he portrayed it, and she called me at 5:30 in the morning.
Because you didn't know the time.
Well, and she wanted to know, you know, who I was and what I wanted with her brother. And so luckily I can talk very fast, and I got it all across, and I could feel the, you know, they were kind of afraid, you know, why I'm calling about this, but they were very happy to get us, you know, a photo for me. And I have become very close with those sisters, and they are Hawaiian descent, and they have asked me to be part of their ohana, and it's just, wow, what an honor.
Heartwarming.
Yeah. So this whole project has been a very, very much an honor for me, and I have met, I go to the monthly meetings, try to make each one, and they usually want an update on how I'm doing and what I'm up to. And I have met some absolutely wonderful veterans, and never being this close to veterans, I didn't realize what kind of hardships that they go through.
Oh, yeah.
They have a very difficult time. You know, they go and fight our battles, and then they come home and fight a different kind of battle, trying to get their benefits, and it's really hard. I really feel for them. I've gotten to go to several events that I've heard, you know, what's really going on. So I'm hoping things will get better in that department someday.
And I think that's what we're all here for today, is to bring more awareness. And I think that's always the first step, is for people to have awareness, because when it's talked about on the news, it's kind of disconnected.
Correct.
It's just like numbers, and the words are kind of, I don't know, actions and troops, and it's not like young men, you know, it's or young women, you know, it's there's a distancing, so people hear it, but they don't connect to it. And that's what you're doing, is you're starting to help people connect to what's really happening. What is this? What is war? What is being a veteran? What is that? What's it like to fight in a foreign country?
Absolutely. I've done several presentations at some of the high schools here, and I was a little worried about whether I could hold an audience of that age, and you could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
They are so respectful, and they're very interested in this project, and it brought a lot of the teachers, a lot of them were about the same age, and they knew, you know, that the war was going on at their time too, so it brings a lot of conversation up, so, yeah, so, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. And what I was going to say about the high schools is, for a lot of them, this is a real decision. You know, do they want to enlist or not? I mean, this is real. This isn't theoretical. And you know, I would love to have more information given to young people from both sides. You know, the ROTC is in many college campuses, and then I would like to have the other side. You know, the combat veterans, and you know, Fred here is Fred Ruge is a combat veteran from the Korean War.
Correct, and I served with the 25th Division, the Tropic Lightning Division from Hawaii. I don't know if you can see my Tropic Lightning tattoo.
There you go.
And before I discuss what I want to talk about, I like to say I'm a 82-year-old veteran, combat veteran, and I'm a veterans advocate, but I want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for any of the veterans organizations I belong to. I'm not speaking for any organization. What I say are my own personal opinion, because different veterans have different opinions on what went on. So I just wanted to put that up front. Now, when I went to Korea, I was 21 years old in 1951, and at that time, President Eisenhower was General Eisenhower then, and he was running for President of the United States. And I think we have a little clip of President Eisenhower, if you want to put that on. Can you play that now, please?
So this is like the background that you want people to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of the...
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
That was the President's farewell speech warning the general public about the possibility of the military-industrial complex spending too much money and taking over the country. And when he was running for president, his first time I voted for president was absentee ballot in Korea. And he said that if I'm elected president, I promise that everybody in Korea will be home by Christmas. Now, this is 62 years later, and we still have troops in Korea. So the industrial military complex is still there. And I want to talk a little bit about our national deficit, because unless we can solve our national deficit, how can we help our veterans? Now, currently, we have a deficit of about $16 trillion. Now, just to give you an idea of how much money that is, 1,000 times 1,000 is 1 million. 1,000 million make a billion, okay? And then 1,000 billion make a trillion. So we're talking about a huge amount of money. And at the present time, the China holds $1.5 trillion of our debt. So we have to come up with some way to start paying down our debt. And what I have a few ideas of some suggestions that people could think about, and I think they should write to congressmen and senators and the Oval Office and say, here are ideas, because it's the simple ideas that solve the problems, not these complicated ideas. And I think that what we should do is, most of you people here are too young to remember, but in World War II, even I was in high school at that time, we went out and we sold war bonds to support the war. We even had contests in the schools, who is the kid that's going to sell the most war bonds. Now, I think that this national debt is owned mostly by foreign countries now, and we have to pay interest on this debt. I think that patriotic Americans, we should have a system just like the war bonds, but I think that what we should call them is, they have now what they call a zero coupon bond. And what this means is that a person buys this bond at a low rate of a discounted rate, and the bonds don't mature for 10 to 20 years. And they use this money either for retirement, or they use the money to put their children through college, because they hold this bond for the 20-year period. And during this 20-year period, the interest builds up on the bond, and the government doesn't pay off the bond until it matures, either 10 or 20 years. And this means that if we could make a few changes in the current zero-interest bond, and now if you own a zero-interest bond, you have to pay taxes every year on the interest. Well, in order to get people to buy these bonds and patriotically get our debt back and let the American people own our debt, we should have the bond structure changed so that people don't have to pay any income tax on the interest. This means that the government has this money free for 10 to 20 years, and at the end of that period of time, they would pay the interest or the maturity price of the bond, and I think that should be tax-free too, to encourage people to buy these bonds. And in that way, we could start paying down our deficit to foreign countries, and we would own the debt ourselves, and all the profit from the debt would be plowed back into the economy of the United States. Right now, there are over 100 companies that are using Switzerland and other countries as their corporate headquarters and amassing huge amounts of money so that they don't have to pay any income tax on it. Now, it might shock you. I'm not going to read off the 100 top companies that actually have their headquarters in Switzerland so they don't have to pay taxes, and one of them is Burger King. Now, they're the kind of companies that are operating in the United States but using Switzerland as their corporate headquarters so they don't have to pay taxes. Now, what I suggest there is that the government let these, and they get millions, trillions of dollars they're holding in foreign banks because they don't want to bring it back to the United States because they want to pay taxes on it. So I suggest that the government should create these bonds, and if these corporations would buy these bonds, they could bring the money back into the United States without paying any taxes on it. Currently, just to give you a little bit of idea of what we're talking about, the Iraq War and the Afghan War, they've spent, I think it's this is a round figure, $1.7 trillion on the war. Now, currently in Afghanistan, they're spending $10 billion a month right now on the war. And we're borrowing all that money, and China is picking up most of the tab and paying them we have to pay 40 cents on the dollar. So these are just estimated figures. So,
do you think that's a wise use of our tax dollars?
No, I think that we should set priorities, and there are other ways that we could save money too. But we should set priorities, and I think that patriotic Americans would do just like they did in World War II. They would buy these bonds. A young couple who just got married can buy these bonds, and when the bond matures in 20 years, they got the money to pay their kids to go to college. Older people could go ahead and put this money in their retirement accounts.
Do you think young people that are getting married now have extra money?
Well, it's they're going to have to start saving, and they could, you could have these bonds in $1,000 increments, or make it easy for them to buy these bonds because they have to have savings accounts anyway. And that's one of the things that would teach kids to be more thrifty, and it would keep the money in the United States, and they would feel they own part of the country. So,
but as far as the government policy, now I'm talking not about the bonds issue, but the government policy. Do you think that the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, Libya, now possibly Iran, do you think those are good uses of tax dollars?
No, I think that what we've got to do is we've got to end these wars and bring the people back home from all over the world. I think that we got administrations, not only the current president, but candidates on both parties that are running for public office. They've never served in the military. They got draft deferments on different grounds when they were young. None of the candidates except Ron Paul is a veteran, and so it's easy to say send somebody else's son off to war. Now they're talking about the only one that's a veteran is Senator McCain, and he's talking about that we should send troops into some of these other Far East countries. And what happens? For example, one candidate's got 5 sons. Okay, he was asked, if any of your sons going to serve in the military? And he said, no, they want other careers. But he turned around in his next speech and said, if I'm elected president, I'm going to be a tough president. If we got to go to war in Afghanistan, we're going to go. But will he send his own family? That's the difference.
Right. And I think many people join the military these days for economic reasons. And I'm assuming this candidate is not in economic hardship, and so his kids don't need to do that because they can go to college and et cetera. But you know what, Fred, we do have a phone call. So I'd like to, hello, caller. Oh, okay. Oh, we don't have a caller yet. Okay. But this is a call-in show. As you can see on the screen, 873-3430. So if you would like to call in and ask either Fred or Janna any questions, please feel free to do so. So we have some videos. Would you like to show the video, the first one?
Second.
Yeah, what I wanted to do is I just want people to be aware that we don't want to criticize the government or the VA or anyone else. We want to point out the problems and help them get solutions to correct and get our country on the right foot.
Yeah, constructive. I mean, you got to have a little constructive criticism, but I understand your point. Solution-oriented.
Yeah, because people criticize, but then they don't come up with a solution.
Yeah,
and
solution-oriented.
I'm encouraging people to get all kinds of ideas and come up with ideas so that we can reduce our deficit.
Absolutely.
And have us own our own deficit. So now I'd like to start talking about our veterans issues, so that if you could show the next clip, please.
Welcome home, man.
This clip shows some of the things that returning veterans face. For example, when I came home from the Korean War, I'm walking down the street, and this guy that I went to high school with said, "Hi, Fred." He said, "I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been?" Well, I was in the war for 2 years, and this guy that I went to high school with didn't even know. So that's how much the public pays attention sometimes to veterans. So this clip shows that we should pay more attention to these veterans so they don't feel so alone, and that we should welcome them back. We should help assist them in getting their benefits and make them feel welcome and appreciated. And I think that Maui is starting to do that better than anyone else. But I think that's one of the key points that we should do. And now I'd like you to show the next clip, if you could, please.
I don't know if they're...
In a recent study, it was estimated that of the 300,000 U.S. veterans returning from the Middle East, that nearly 20% will experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And with the suicide rate being 3 times higher than the general population, an average of 18 will commit suicide each day. Although they have endured the battle abroad, for many veterans, the real fight begins upon their return home. Now more than ever, they need our help. To learn more on how you can volunteer at your local VA hospital, go to volunteer.va.gov.
Now, that clip showed that a lot of the veterans coming back, a higher percentage of veterans coming back from the current 2 wars are suffering from PTSD because it was an entirely different type of war. And a lot of these people won't ask for help. They feel that they don't want to tell anybody that they've got mental problems, and there used to be a stigma to that. I don't think there is anymore, but still a lot of the veterans won't go to the VA. And
I want to share something. When I was working in Canada as a psychologist, I went to a workshop, and it was called Military Culture 101, and it was for mental health workers, and it was basically telling us that, that PTSD on some level is going to be almost everybody coming back, that it's traumatic, it's an adjustment, and unfortunately domestic abuse is very common in families, in military families, especially when there's these tours, these combat, because it's so stressful and so, we're all taught our whole lives, thou shalt not kill, and then all of a sudden we're told, no, you should kill, and then you go and do it, and then it's like the mind can't just kind of, okay, that was good then, and now the mind isn't really capable of adjusting to that.
Well, the current war, the veterans coming back have the highest suicide rate that they've ever had in a service.
And what do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to the fact that many of them have been deployed 3 and 4 times. We have all volunteer Army now. We don't have the draft. And so what happens is that most of the people in the Army now, particularly the ones in the Guard, they joined the Guard because they needed a job. They needed extra money.
It's economic.
And so they didn't anticipate on going to war. And then when the towers went down and they were called up, at that time, we should have had the draft and put everybody in there. One presidential candidate got his deferment because he was a missionary. And, of course, people get all kinds of reasons. Another one got 5 deferments because he was going to college.
Yeah.
5
Because he was in a better economic
and
position.
This particular president was in the Vietnam era. Right. And never served. So I think that people should be aware of all these problems these veterans have. And I will say this, that the Veterans Administration is like any other bureaucracy. Yeah. There are a lot of good people, and they work very hard in the Veterans Administration. And then there are a few that don't. But unfortunately, and I hear a lot of complaints from the veterans employees from the VA, that the government's got so many regulations that they have to comply with that it's even hard for them to help the veterans.
To do their job.
Now, for example...
Wait, hold on. We do have a caller. Is that right? Okay. So, hello, caller.
Yes, I'm here. First of all, I wanted to take issue with something Fred said about we don't have a draft. And we do. It's a backdoor, sneaky draft, and it's done by the Justice Department's arm of the military-industrial complex. And it was in when I was in during the 70s, and it's in operation right now, and I saw it in a courtroom up in Wailuku, and that's where kids who are up for misdemeanors and this and that again are given the choice between jail and this and that or the Army.
Interesting.
So the military-industrial complex picks on poor people like usual, as they always have. My whiskey company in Fort Lee, Virginia, was probably 75% poor black kids from the streets of New York and New Jersey who'd stolen one too many car, done something stupid, and they were given the choice between jail and the Army. That's what's on the front lines. The other thing was we're going to build an educational center somewhere about the Vietnam War, and I'm just wondering, are we going to allocate 1 square foot of it to the attack on the USS Maddox? Because that's where the parallels between Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam are drawn real nice and neat. We went and retaliated against the Vietnamese people for an attack on a warship that never took place, kind of like we're retaliating against the Arab people for an attack that never took place. 2 airplanes did not knock down 3 buildings. I basically disowned my daughter for joining the Air Force over this. She knew the fury I felt towards the U.S. government after the fraud called Vietnam went down, and that has relegated all of us to war criminals. We keep pinning medals on ourselves like what we've done is okay, but it is a lie.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Federal Reserve.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to say to you is that you're making some good points, but we only have a few minutes left, and I'd like to concentrate how we can help the current veterans. But I do appreciate your calling. One of the things that the veterans have problems with is I've got one form here, and this that a veteran would take in if he asked for benefits. And the name of the form is 1010 Easy.
And it's
there's
anything
nothing easy about it. 6 pages, and a veteran gets very frustrated when he goes through these forms and tries to fill it out. And 16% of the veterans that fill out forms and send them in, they're sent back because they made mistakes in the form. And the government says, well, if the form isn't correct, you have to do it over again. So this delays their benefits over and over again. Another thing that the little things that we could do now on Maui, for example, we have a federal veterans office, and we have a state veterans office, and we have the CBOC clinic. And all these people try to do a tremendous job. Naturally, it's only human nature that all my fellow veterans, not all of them, but a lot of them complain about the service, but they don't realize that these employers are doing the best they can. And rather than criticize our hard workers, the doctors and the nurses and the technical people and the psychiatrists and everything, I think we should do everything we can to help them. And one way that we could help these people is, for example, if a veteran calls the VA, particularly CBOC, and says, I need help, what do they get? A machine answers the phone.
Yeah.
Okay? The machine gives this veteran 10 or 12 options. If this is the problem, punch 1. If this is a problem, punch 2. Well, the poor veteran is confused. He don't even know which button he should push.
And this is a person who's likely suffering from post-traumatic stress and is not able to think very clearly already. And then
he's
they added
crying for help.
And then they add this level of, I mean, any of us, when under stress, under a lot of stress, it's really hard to think clearly. And then this is way too complex.
And then what happens is, let's say they take a guess. I guess this is the I should push this button. So they push that. What do they get then? They get another voicemail. And the voicemail voice, not a human being, another voice tells them that leave your telephone number and information and we'll call you back. Okay? The VA even admits on Maui that 90% of the time they never call them back. And the reason they don't call them back, they're so overworked they don't have time to call them back.
And what would you say, what is the core reason there's understaffing? What I've heard is because it's federal recruiting, and it takes so long to recruit people, and then people don't stay because they come from the mainland and they don't realize what life is like here. Yeah,
what happens, first I want to finish the telephone thing. Here's my suggestion, and I sent this to the VA. And I would urge everyone listening, if they would write a letter to the VA and back and support this. Sometimes a simple solution is we spend billions of dollars why don't we put one live person there and answer the telephone? Now, that would do two things. It would calm the veteran down. He wouldn't get excited and frustrated, but it would also take a lot of the stress off the staff of the people
Exactly.
at the clinics. And what happens right now, our clinic here is 50% understaffed, okay?
Right.
And one of the problems is the veterans, the law, I don't know if it's the unions or the government, the VA, whatever it is, that if an opening comes here, they got to post that bid, and anyone in the United States who wants to take that job, they can come and take it. So what do? They say, oh, Hawaii, I got enough seniority, I want that job. They come to Hawaii, they don't realize the cost of living here.
Yeah.
They don't realize they get island fever because they're not used to being stuck on a little island, and all their relatives and friends and everybody are back on the mainland. So what do? They only serve a short period of time, a year or two, and they go back to wherever they came from. Then they got to start the process all over again. The manager over at CBOC told me it takes 6 months to a year just to hire one person. Now, we should somehow, they've got to streamline the system so that these veterans can get the help they need. I mean, it's just unbelievable, and it puts tremendous stress on the staffs, too. Now, in Honolulu, they're about 50% understaffed because one of the problems, the doctors, particularly on Maui, they keep turning the doctors over. One of the reasons the doctors leave is because it just got too much. They work too hard. They just can't handle it, and so they give up and leave. And so I think we've got to urge the federal government to do something about this. And of course, it's a huge bureaucracy. And how are we going to streamline it? We have to do it one simple thing at a time. For example, that idea that we put a live person in there. Very simple. Just how much is a budget for one person, one telephone operator for a whole year? They throw that much money away. I really feel sad when I read that they want to give Egypt $1.5 billion and just outright gift. And they're already turning against us. They already announced that Israel is their enemy. We shouldn't be giving them a penny. Why don't we take that $1.5 billion and put it into new employees and streamline the system so these veterans would be so frustrated? And
so you were talking to me the other day about that it's the amount of care that all of these veterans, the veterans we have now and the new veterans that we're creating, that it's going to take billions of dollars, and that you're concerned that with this deficit right up here and the continuing wars, that there's going to be a problem caring for the vets.
Sure, they're going to run out of money if we don't solve the wasteful spending. And in the next 40 years, just the current veterans, there's something like 10,000 veterans a week that are applying for benefits coming back. And these two wars are unusual because now with the doctors and the helicopters and everything, somebody gets wounded, they can get them back to the hospital and save their life. But they might have a leg missing, or an arm missing, or their mind is shot. And so we wind up with the smallest death rate. I think in the 2 wars in 10 years, there's only been 5,000 or 6,000 people killed. But they've had something like 300,000 people that are going to be on the VA benefits for the rest of their life because they lost their leg or an arm, or they're having mental problems. And so this war is going to cost more in the long run than World War II did when you get through with it. These guys most of them are young people. They're in their early 20s, and some of them they lost their legs and everything. We're going to have to take care of those people for the next 50, 60, 70 years. So this war is going to cost so much more that people don't realize. So I hope that the audience out there will think of simple ways like getting a live operator, things that we can do to help the veteran. And right now, homelessness is right on Maui. We estimate there's 50 homeless veterans living on the beach.
Yeah.
50. And the only ones that I know of, there are probably other people helping them, but the only ones that I know that are helping them is the Salvation Army. They go out and go on the beach and feed these veterans, and they also have a place where 34 people can sleep every night. So this is, and I know there's probably other organizations, but I'm just familiar with this one. And so what I'm suggesting is that we have a new way of looking at veterans. Now, during World War II, when a veteran died, the mother or the family were called a Gold Star mother. They put a gold star in the window to show that their son died in the war. Okay. Then during the Vietnam War, they had the yellow ribbon. Okay. Now I'm suggesting that we come up with something brand new, that we start thinking about. It's nice, and you're doing a wonderful thing in helping the people that died by recognition, but we've got to start helping the living. And what I'm suggesting, that we have a new group, and we call them the Blue Star Patriots. And I want everybody to get a blue star and put it in their window. And this will tell the public that we're going to do everything we can to welcome the veterans back from all the wars. And we're going to welcome the veterans back, and that we're also going to say that I will become an advocate to help a veteran in any way I can.
Excellent.
And this will cost nothing for the people other than the cost of that little gold star. It'll be it won't be a 501c or any kind of a group as out to make money. It's just a group to recognize the veteran and appreciate what they went through, thank them for their service, and how can we help you? Can we take you down to the hospital? Can we go shop
Simple
for you?
things, yeah.
All these various things. So that's pretty much it.
That's a great idea. Okay.
Thank you, Netra, very much for inviting me here, and I hope that that people have heard us and they'll come and help the veterans.
I do too. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, Janna, what would you like from the public?
Well, I'm in the fundraising stage of this project, and I'm trying to raise $42,000 to represent the Maui boys for the building of the education center. $1,000 per soldier.
$42,000. That's a serious chunk of change.
And I've got some of it, but I need a lot more. So I'm hoping that Maui will come together and help get behind me on this project. And I thank you very much for allowing me to share my project with you.
Well, my pleasure. I've really appreciated having both of you here and alerting the public. I mean, that's what Netra's News is about, is giving people the truth, the real truth, what's really going on from the people involved. And I'm going to have more shows on veterans, because I think this is a really unplumbed issue that really needs a lot more information. So thank you for joining us here at Netra's News, and I look forward to other issues. We're going to be talking about substance abuse treatment. We're going to be talking about men who batter and why. You know, I mean, anger management is good, but what's the core? So thank you for coming to Netra's News, and we hope to see you in a couple weeks.